Hello crime fans, and welcome to the first of a 6 video series of crime writing workshops, I suppose you would call them. It's hard to really call them a workshop since you aren't there in front of me, bouncing ideas off me and things like that. But as this thing evolves and develops, maybe we'll find a way of doing that, perhaps through Patreon or Zoom or something, But for now, consider this video like a taster. This is the first one. This is going to be given away for free on YouTube, and it'll give you an idea if what I'm doing chimes with you, It's kind of like a good creative writing teacher. It's kind of like getting a good counsellor or, a good partner in life. It has to be something that you kind of enjoy spending time with, and who you kind of understand, and who makes sense to you, If you're looking to write a great literary fiction novel, this maybe isn't the course for you. I would consider myself an expert in crime fiction, backed up by my PhD, which is a creative writing PhD focused on crime fiction. I am a published crime fiction writer. I'm a crime fiction fan, and I've done an 8-week course for the Irish Writing Centre. I've done it a couple of times for the New Ireland Festival of Writing. I've been commissioned a few times for this kind of thing, but this is the very first time I've done it virtually. The idea to do this came about, basically I wanted to apply for some funding from the Arts Council, and the idea behind this funding was to sort of reinvigorate your career. And I just thought about the kind of thing that I couldn't do during that whole lockdown, and one of the big things was going out and meeting people to do writing workshops. You just can't do that, so this is a new way of doing it. I saw people doing all their Zoom meetings and things like that. I've seen other virtual book launches, virtual panels and things like that. So I thought, well, why not do a creative writing workshop and see how it goes. So here we go. This is the very first in what I have previously said is a 6-week course. I'm expecting these videos to be around half an hour, 40 minutes. And there should be no fluff in them, no filler, When this course was originally designed, it was with a mind to teach for an hour, and within that hour though you have to allow for people stopping you and asking you questions and things like that. In the short term, what we'll do when you want to ask me a question is you can leave a comment on the video and I will get back to you. I don't get that many comments, so it won't be a great challenge to get back to you. And from there we can build. I'll probably offer different packages as this idea develops. I think I might go down the road of mentorship. I might offer editing packages, that kind of thing, because that's something else that I have done. I've also edited novels and non-fiction books and things like that. But every time I start a crime fiction workshop, whether it's a one-day thing, whether it's a 6-week course, whatever, I always bring up Leonard's rules for writing crime fiction. Now, this list of 10 rules was born of an article for the Telegraph, I think it was at one point, or else the Times possibly, where Leonard kind of tongue-in-cheek gave what he considered to be his rules for writing a good crime fiction novel. And the 10 rules are great, but also these are actually tools, not rules. I stole that off a really cool screenwriter called Spence Wright years ago. There are no writing rules, there are only writing tools. And in my mind, I guess these 10 rules should be Leonard's 10 tools. That doesn't really have the same ring to it. So he opens these rules with number 1, never open a book with weather. Okay, so none of that, it was a stormy night and, whatchamacallit. However, sometimes you can. There's a writer I'm very fond of called Adrian McKenty, and I know that he sometimes starts off a novel with the sole intent of breaking a few of these rules just because he's that kind of contrarian. And I can think of a few Sean Duffy novels and a few Michael Forsyth novels that break these rules. One of the ones that he likes to break is the weather one. I'm not really sure what the idea behind that is. I think, I am when it comes to Leonard's voice, and that's something we'll talk about further on in this course, is the idea of voice and, style and what that brings to your writing. Elmore Leonard is known as a pared down, no nonsense crime fiction writer, and he's not going to take the time to open a book with the weather. That's the equivalent of stopping in the middle of a high speed chase to talk to somebody about whether or not it's going to rain later. It's just not his thing. So he likes to just get straight in, which leads on to his second rule, which is avoid prologues. Now, some people follow this rule sort of by paying lip service to it. What they do is, instead of calling it the prologue, they just call it chapter 1. But sometimes we know that they're really writing a prologue. Usually a prologue is like a little abstract piece of writing that'll relate to the book maybe at the midpoint or in the third act or something like that. And we'll talk about midpoints, third acts and all that in possibly part 3 of the course, where I'm talking about structure. But for now, what I mean is a little snippet of writing, not quite as long enough to be a chapter, perhaps usually a page or 2 pages in most cases, that sort of gets you into the action of the book right away, and then you go back to like a normal point, like normal life in the book. So it's kind of a foreshadowing of what's to come, and usually that's brought back into the book about halfway through the book, right in the middle, or sometimes you'll see it called back in the third act, which is usually 3/4 of the way through the book, or between 3/4 and the end of the book. And again, I think once more, Elmore Leonard, stripped down, get straight to the writing. Why bother with a prologue? Make the start of the book more interesting than a prologue would have been, and then just run with it. So again, that's his style, and we'll get to the end of the rules before I start talking a bit more about that. Sure. The third one was never use a verb other than said to carry dialogue. So that's like, what are you doing here? John said. And why, I thought you wanted to see me, Jessica said. Where some people will say, what are you doing here? John demanded. I wanted to see you, Jessica interceded. Or, they start getting more and more complicated with their words, until people are actually, I've seen people write in the book, oh no, John ejaculated. That's the kind of writing you want to dodge. That's a real clanger of a thing. But that's the thing though, when you start going beyond said and trying to bring in all these different ideas, these different verbs to carry your dialogue, you start either overusing one thing, or you're just going so out of your way to make this something different every time that you start using really ridiculous verbs to carry the dialogue. I've heard it described as said is almost invisible when you start seeing it so often. John said, she said, Jessica said, he said, whatever. It becomes a nothing, and that way it doesn't distract the reader. Whereas if you make one of those weird little verbs like he ejaculated, that's going to distract the reader. That's going to pull them out of your story, and that's the last thing you want to happen in your story. Now, adding on to that, rule number 4 is never use an adverb to modify the verb said, as in he admonished gravely. 2 pretty bad choices. A lot of the time the writer's trying to get across a sort of a bit of tone or a bit of drama or something like that. But an accomplished writer will already have demonstrated the tone or, the emotion behind the writing through what has been said, rather than saying, I want you to undress, she said, sexily. Maybe I should slip into something more comfortable, she said, seductively. It's like, well, we know that she's trying to seduce or be sexy by saying these things, so really that's redundant. You're just adding in an extra word that nobody needs to be reading, and a lot of time comes out sounding pretty clunky. Number 5 then is keep your exclamation points under control, which is something that kind of people seem to lose the run of that when they're writing emails or Facebook updates or whatever, texts and whatnot. Elmore Leonard reckons the ratio should be that you're allowed no more than 2 or 3 per 100,000 words of prose. To be honest, that kind of makes sense to me too. Again, this is about relying on the actual writing rather than, things like punctuation. You know if something requires exclamation simply by the situation or the context or the actual words that have been used. So there's no need to be splashing these little exclamation points everywhere. Just a reminder, since we've hit the halfway point, these are Elmore Leonard's rules for writing an Elmore Leonard novel. My advice is you pick and choose from this. If this is something that sounds right to you, take that rule and run with it. If it's something that you've decided is a good rule for you, but it's getting in the way of you finishing that story or finishing that chapter of a novel, you probably should just get rid of it. Because really, at the end of the day, anything that prevents you from writing should be avoided. That's the main thing. That's probably my number one rule for writing. I might have a number one rule for every other one of these videos. But my number one rule is probably, if it's taking you away from writing, avoid it. Anyway, number 6 here is never use the word suddenly or all hell broke loose. And again, you're seeing a pattern here, I hope. The writing should be doing that job for you. You know, there's no need to say suddenly. If you say, Henry jumped out of a tree and attacked John. Well, there's no need to say he jumped out of that tree suddenly, because he's not going to be able to jump out of a tree slowly in order to surprise attack his opponent. So, you know, kind of no-brainer there. So I'll give him that. Use regional dialect and patois sparingly. Again, I think maybe Irvine Welsh would argue with that one because he has written entire books in patois or regional dialect, and it was nowhere near sparing at all. They were quite long books. And in fact, Elmore Leonard's son, Peter Leonard, has broken this rule in a novel called Quiver, in which he has a black character. And he writes dialogue for him, which could possibly get him cancelled today, or at least get a very angry letter off his, what is it called, sensitivity reader, which I'm sure he has at his level. Yeah, it sort of veered into the whole, I don't know, Dick Van Dyke trying to do a Cockney accent in Mary Poppins. You know, there were a few times you were going, I'm not sure that's a good idea to write that. Still a great book, you know, but it's interesting that the son doesn't always listen to the father. I think, you know, that's pretty normal, really, isn't it? Number 8 is to avoid detailed descriptions of characters. Now again, this one does make a bit of sense to me. I feel like if you give a very detailed description of a character, you're kind of killing some of the enjoyment for your reader. You know, a reader is probably going to slowly develop an image of your protagonist and all the supporting cast as they are reading, you know, based on people they've known. It'll probably be like, you know, if it's a heroic character, it's probably an amalgamation of all their best looking boyfriends or something like that. And when you contradict that image that they have in their head, that sort of, it steals a little bit of that personal touch they're adding to the book. You know, it's taken away from what they are bringing to the book, because really a reader is a collaborator with a novelist. You know, a lot of the time they are enjoying the work that you've written, but also they're enjoying it through the lens of their own experience. Everybody who reads a book will not interpret it the same way. Again, some people will like a character, some people will hate a character, depending on their own moral, you know, fortitude or whatever. And a lot of people will get very precious about how they consider their characters, which is why you'll see an uproar. Like, for an example, whenever Tom Cruise was chosen to play Jack Reacher from the Lee Child novels, Reacher is like 6'2" or something in those novels. Tom Cruise is not, and that caused an awful lot of despair with fans of that series who couldn't adjust their suspension of disbelief to include Tom Cruise as a potential Jack Reacher. That's what's going to happen. So that is one way of giving your empowering your reader, I suppose, giving them ownership of your work, which is really what you want to do. I mean, you can't spoon feed a reader everything. And the great thing about reading is that you are using your own fertile imagination to fill in all the white space. In a movie or a play or whatever, you have your actor who portrays that character, and that's what they look like. You know, Tyler Durden looks like Brad Pitt. That's just what he looks like. You can't imagine him in any other fashion, you know. So yeah, it's an interesting one, that one, actually. I think that throws up quite a lot of stuff. 9 is don't go into detail describing places and things. Yeah, I'm actually 100% on board with this one. My reasoning behind this is that if you walk into a room that you've been in 100 times, you just don't notice it, really. You know, it's somewhere you take for granted all the features of that room. But if you walk into that room for the 101st time and someone has taken down the curtains and installed green blinds, or they've kicked out the window and installed a fancy French doorway or something like that, you're going to notice that. So as an author or a narrator, whatever way you want to think of it, your main character, who usually you're channeling, your main character will be your avatar. That's what they'll notice, that's what they'll remark upon, and that's what they'll describe within the prose. They won't talk about the same brown leather couch that they've seen for the last 10 years. You know, they won't talk about the TV that has too much dust on it. They won't talk about the threadbare carpet, because those are all things that they're used to, that they see all the time. It's the novelty of something new that they will pick up on and that they will describe to the reader then, because they're really describing it to themselves. You know, they're noticing it and they're thinking, that's quite strange. That's not gonna happen in a room that you're completely familiar with. So that's actually a really good rule, if you ask me. And 10 is trying to leave out the part that readers tend to skip. Now, I'd say Elmore's tongue was firmly lodged in his cheek there. If everybody knew what readers found boring, we would only write interesting books. Why would we shoot ourselves in the foot otherwise, you know? But I kind of get what he says, you know. For the typical crime fiction fan, they're probably not going to appreciate reams of purple prose. You know, they don't want to see how clever you are with your wordplay. They don't want to know how smart you are with all your big massive words and whatnot. They just want to read your story. Usually they just want to get to the plot. If it's a whodunit, they want to find out whodunit, you know. And you're not helping them find that out by describing a flock of pigeons flying gracefully away from Oxford or something. Whatever. You know, it's that kind of thing people tend to skip. It's the long thing. Or maybe there's a character who is just, you know, like you're trudging through all his passages because he's so depressing, or, you know, life has treated him so badly and he just can't get over himself. And, you know, sometimes you're just like, I cannot deal with this guy anymore. Just let me get on with this. That's, you know. But you know what? I find that, say 9 times out of 10, by the way, I make up statistics, say 87.4% of the time, but 9 times out of 10 seems about right to me. 9 times out of 10, if the writer is bored of what he's writing, the reader will be too bored to read it. You know, you know yourself when your writing's lagging, or you will get to know. But really the first hint is, if it's not doing anything for you, there is no way it's going to do anything for your reader, okay? Your writing has to invigorate and excite you. You can't hope that what you find boring someone else is going to find interesting, okay? You're trying to find like-minded readers. You're trying to find people who like your style, who like what you have to say. If what you have to say bores you, you're saying the wrong thing. Fair enough? So that was Elmore Leonard's 10 rules. Again, tongue firmly in cheek for quite a few of them. Not all of them will apply to you. Some people love prologues. Some people like to use, you know, adverbs along with their dialogue tags. Some people love reading long descriptions about the weather, and therefore they like writing them. Which again, if it's not boring you, it's probably going to be interesting to somebody else. You know, the kind of reader that this writer wants to attract. What I didn't point out was that Elmore Leonard has like a catch-all rule that sums up all 10 of these rules, and this one is actually pretty on the nose. He says that if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. Okay, so Elmore Leonard reads what he's written, which any good writer should do anyway. You gotta get used to reading your own prose because you're going to be editing it. You're probably going to end up reading anything you write hundreds of times before it even gets as far as publishing, and then once someone offers to publish it, you're going to read it another 100 times as they go through all their edits and passes and proofreading and all the rest. So you're going to, if it sounds a bit clangy, if it sounds like it's writing, if it doesn't sound natural, it needs to be rewritten to sound more natural, which is pretty cool. And that was, I was guessing earlier. I didn't need to guess where this came from because I actually have it written down because I'm more organised than I think I am. That was taken from a New York Times article titled "Easy Only Adverbs, exclamation points, and especially hoop-de-doodle," which is pretty cool. Speaking about writers who I admire and who have said some wise things to me in the past, many years ago, my son was just born and he's 15 now, so 15 years ago, I was trying to make a real go at this writing thing, and I applied for a writing mentorship through an old organisation that's gone now called the Creative Writers Network in Belfast. They hooked me up with a writer called Mcdonald, and Ian is a highly esteemed science fiction writer, multiple award winner such as the Hugo Awards, which are massive science fiction awards, for his work, which has spanned decades and, unbelievably gets better and better the more he writes. I suppose that's not that unbelievable, but you just think, Jesus, this guy's really good, and then he impresses you with the next one. Ian's also very deep thinker, and he really knows what he's doing. He's the kind of guy, he plans out books, he does character bibles, all sorts. This is the kind of thing he was telling me about during the mentorship, and I was lucky enough to take his wisdom, cherry pick it, use what works for me and discard the rest, which is what we do. We're kind of magpies, us writers. But one of the things that Ian said that has stuck with me ever since, and that will probably always stick with me, was that if you're not reading, you're not writing. And I've been through many periods of writer's block, I suppose you would call it, where it's not just laziness, it's not just like ennui, it's just, I can't do this. Anytime you might write something, but it's not the kind of thing you're going to keep. You get rid of it right away. So if you're not reading, you're not writing. I think that's very good advice. And if you break it down, what you can take from that is, if your writing has kind of stuttered to a stop, you might want to try picking up a book, especially a book within the genre that you're trying to write. Or perhaps you want to take a book outside your genre, because maybe that little period of writer's block is trying to tell you that you need to take a different approach to this thing, that maybe your style needs to change a little bit, and that you should just read more. Really, just read. How can you trust a writer that doesn't read? How do they know what they're writing is actually good? How can you do that? You can't trust a writer that doesn't read. I can't. And if you tell me you don't read but you want to write books, I'm not going to read your books, really. You might get away with doing TV because everybody watches TV. You could write plays if you like to go to plays. If somebody who had never seen a movie decided to write a movie, how would that even work? Someone who doesn't go to plays isn't going to know what to write to make a stage play work. So read books if you want to write books, please. And drop a wee comment down there in the comment section, and let us know which writers you like and why. Who you use as your comfort reader, almost like your emotional support author, because I can tell you a lot about what you would probably enjoy writing, or who else you would enjoy reading, which is also really important. At the end of the day, writers want to be writers because they have enjoyed reading books their entire lives, more often than not, and that finding another writer is a magical thing, especially if it's one that really rings your bell. So do that, read more, discover more, ask your friends about books, talk about books, go on to Facebook pages that talk about books, do everything, do all that stuff, and enjoy. Okay? Now, sometimes when I have a little bit of trouble getting started on the writing, there's a book I like to refer back to quite often, which is called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Cleon. I actually lent my copy to my sister, and I'll probably not see it again because she seems to enjoy it quite a lot. But it's one of them little short books that I read maybe 20 times, and I had little notes written on it and things like that. It's very short. The person who wrote it, Cleon, is a poet from Austin, Texas. Austin from Austin. He has some really interesting stuff to say on creativity. Mostly that you should do it. And try not to worry too much about what's holding you back. You know, try not to let you talk yourself out of it. Try not to let other people talk you out of it. But really, a lot of the time, no one's telling you, here, you shouldn't be writing them books. A lot of the time, it's just you talking yourself out of it because you can think of something more interesting to do that you would rather be doing right there and then. But I feel like it's always a good idea to sort of find something that does motivate you like that. And if this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. So I've chosen a few choice quotes from that book. Thankfully, I'd written them down because, like I said, my sister stole my book. I could buy another copy, which actually would be a good idea since I've got so much out of it. It would be nice to sort of support that book again. But from Steal Like an Artist by Austin Cleon, on page 32, Austin says, "The script is just plain old time. An hour here, an hour there. Just time measured out for things to happen. Fake it till you make it." Okay? And that's a very simple idea. It's just telling you that, you know, it's kind of like the whole idea, you know, every great journey starts with a footstep, you know? Every footstep builds up. Same thing. Every word you put on the page goes towards building that sentence. Every sentence goes towards building that paragraph. Every paragraph builds that chapter. Every chapter builds that book. You know, it's small things. You gotta take it slowly. Try not to get overwhelmed by how much time you're going to spend doing this thing, about where your ideas are going to come from. You just do one word, next word, next word, next word. Oh, here, that's a cool wee sentence. On to the next sentence. Okay? On page 36, Austin writes, "The writer Wilson Misner said if you copy from one author, it's plagiarism. But if you copy from many, it's research." Okay? So again, slightly tongue-in-cheek stuff, but that's why it sticks in your head, you know, and it's witty, but it's also the truth. We are all a product of what we absorb, you know, media-wise, and that'll include, you know, every movie, every song, every book, every chance encounter with a person, every time you've stopped and looked out the window and thought, oh, okay, look at that bird passing that cloud. All these things inform your outlook on life, and then that then also informs your output when you're writing. And it goes back to that whole thing I was talking about earlier. Read. You nearly think I planned this out, wouldn't you? You gotta read because you gotta know what you like, but you also have to inform your own mind as to what's possible out there and what you can do that's kind of the same but kind of different, okay? You know, if you're writing within a genre, you're following certain rules, but you don't want to follow them to the extent that you are not adding anything new to the genre. You know, just copying a book is plagiarism. Yeah, you know, if you just follow it and you just say, yeah, I can do that, and you basically write a pastiche of that story, it may as well be plagiarism, you know. But if you have read widely and you've taken different things from different authors, you know, you like the wit of Chandler, you like that, you know, pared down prose of Hammett, you know, you like the tension that Stephen King can build. If you can find a way of distilling that into your own thing, then you're winning, you know. On page 107, it says, "So go on, get angry, but keep your mouth shut and go do your work." Okay? And this is one of the reasons people say that crime writers are such nice people, because generally when you meet one of us, and I found this is the rule too, most of us, say 90%, again with a made up statistic, but say 90% of the writers I've met, probably more than that in fact, are really cool people, really nice, really chill, you know, not a whole lot of anger at the forefront of their personality, just nice, genuine people. And one of the theories that explains that is that those people have written all the badness out of themselves, you know. Anything that's annoyed them, whoever cut them off in traffic, sure, they've already murdered them in a book by the time they've got home from that journey, you know. They've found a new character to put into their book and they've got their own wee sick revenge on them. And that is a kind of therapeutic approach that benefits you two ways, you know, centers you a little bit, but it also gives you something to write about. So yeah, get angry, but put that anger into something constructive instead of just shouting at clouds. Okay. In page 140 of Austin Cleon's terrific book, Steal Like an Artist, he writes, "In the end, creativity isn't just the things we choose to put in, it's the things we choose to leave out." So I could go on to a whole 20-minute rant about people not editing their books properly. I could talk about the idea of white space and whatnot. But you know what? I'm going to let you interpret that one yourself. Again, it is, in the end, creativity isn't just the things we choose to put in, it's the things we choose to leave out. And I'm going to leave that one sort of less explained than the others because it's a nice one to think about, and it'll probably apply as you develop as a writer as well. You'll want to be thinking about that. But it kind of touches on the idea of show, don't tell, which is going to be another topic at another time. We're kind of getting towards the end of this wee workshop right now. So what I'm going to do is just spit out a few little tips, and then I'm going to suggest a couple of writing exercises that you might want to attempt to help put a few of the things that we've talked about into practice. And you know, it's the kind of thing, like, if you're doing this, it's for the sake of this exercise. It's not something that you have to immediately find a publishing house for or something. So just have fun with it, you know. Don't fret over it, don't worry too long over it. Just get it done. Do it. It's all good. It's all good. Just write. If you've gotten this far in this video, like we're 30 minutes into this thing, and you haven't clicked off it, you're probably pretty serious about writing. You probably do have it in you to have a go at it. Have a few practice runs. You know, nothing you do for the first time is ever going to come out perfect, but the more you do it, the better it's going to get. Okay? So when you do these exercises, here are a few things that I want you to consider. And I'll put some of this stuff in the description of the video as well, so that you can refer back to it without having to run through the whole video and listen to me again. It'll be written in text and pretty easy to access. And again, you know, follow me on social medias. I'll have all those links down there as well. Mostly if you tap in Jared Brennan in any social media, I'm going to pop up. But if you want to ask me about anything in these videos, you can do it through that. You can email me, you can comment on this video, and time permitting, I'll get back to you. And I'll give you my perspective on it, which will then eventually inform your own idea or your own angle on that perspective. Writing tips. Number 1, use fresh language and avoid cliches. That's easier said than done, but if you find yourself writing something like, "He was like a rabbit in the headlights," people have written that too many times, they've said it too many times. Okay, so that's a short example. I want to blast through these because we're sort of pushing it for engaging people with this length of a video. So yeah, that's my one example. If you're writing something like "he was a rabbit in the headlights," it's a cliche, and people are bored of reading that. Economy. Don't repeat yourself if possible. And again, these are particularly useful when writing crime fiction because, again, we want a good, speedy plot. You know, you want the pace to be driven really fast where it needs to be fast. You don't want to repeat yourself too many times. You don't want to, like, drop clues and then, you know, have a big neon sign pointing to it saying, "Reader, you should take notice of this because you'll enjoy the book better if you do it this way." Don't worry about that. Get through it. Economy of words is a good way of keeping your reader engaged. If they feel like they're not doing as much work to read your book, they're going to read for longer, they're going to read more, they're going to get more out of the book in the end. Number 3 is concrete language. This is really important. Avoid abstractions and abstract nouns, which is a noun denoting an idea, quality, or state rather than a concrete object. So words like truth, danger, and happiness, they're not tangible things. So you can't say, "Oh, I just felt like I was falling in love with this person." You know, use more concrete language, like, "My palms got sweaty and my heart sped up every time I was around them. My tongue got tied. I couldn't speak to them properly. There were times I thought I was going blind. They were so stunning looking," you know. And that's getting across that you're falling in love, but it's also using things that are of the real world, you know, concrete language, tangible things, which people will relate to much better and which will improve the quality of your writing as well, because reaching for those concrete images is going to make your writing more interesting. And then finally, like I hinted at earlier, show, don't tell. Now we could do a whole half hour on show, don't tell probably, and I'll probably put that into one of the next videos. But for now, if you're confused about it, check it out online. There are blog posts out there that that'll tell you these things, that'll help you understand and explore these things. But if we relate it to like concrete language, say, just to make it a wee bit easier to remember here, show, don't tell. An example, we are telling you that a character in the book is angry by saying, John was angry. Not exactly, you know, popping off the page there, is it? However, and these may be slightly cliched, you know, so again, you got to use all these rules together. But if you said that John's knuckles were white with grip in his hands, his teeth were clenched and his jaw muscles swole, every word he said shook, he was angry. And you didn't really need to say that bit at the end about him being angry, because all the other bits before that are sort of telling you, but also they're making the writing more interesting because the reader's going, ooh, he's about to pop off. But you didn't have to hold their hand the whole way through that paragraph. You gave them concrete language. You tried to avoid cliches. Obviously, white knuckle grip's a cliche, yeah, you know. But you'll find another way of doing that. Like maybe they've broke a pencil with their thumb, you know, or they've done something that will convey anger. It's up to you to come up with this. Like, I'm only telling you how to do these things. I'm not going to write your books for you. Okay, so those are some pretty good rules for improving the quality of your writing. We've talked about what Leonard does to create his own voice, and how some of those things could actually be argued with, you know, that some of them are actually useful. Some books need a prologue, for example. You know, some books need to start with the weather. But generally, those are rules for writing like Leonard. You'll develop your own rules or tools as you progress as a writer, and you will probably stick to them, and then when it suits you, you'll break those rules too, even if you've brought them yourself. Come up with them yourself. So we're at the stage now where we want to talk about our writing exercises, or writing prompts, or whatever you want to take from it. I mean, the thing is, I can't sit there and tell you to do your homework, but if I say something and you sort of think to yourself, that sounds like it'd be kind of cool to do, then just do it, because it's going to help your writing, isn't it? Well, I'm telling you it is, and I'm like the writing expert here, apparently, so yeah, you should probably listen to me. So the first writing exercise is consider the elevator pitch, which is, in 25 words or less, describe the short story or novel that you always wanted to write. And for the sake of us doing a crime fiction course, try and make it a crime fiction idea. And writing exercise number 2, and this would probably make Leonard happy. Start the first scene of your story in dialogue only, without any dialogue tags. So no he said, she said, John said, Jean said. None of that. Cut it all out. Dialogue. Just write dialogue and try and get that story, the start of that story, across. Now, this isn't going to be the opening to your novel, unless it does become the opening to your novel. But it may get you started thinking in the right direction for that sort of thing. Okay? And I think we're going to call time on this video, because we are at 40 minutes now. I wish I had taken the time to come up with a cool sign out kind of catchphrase or something, but I haven't got one. So what I'm going to say is, smell you later, crime writers, and I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has been, keep an eye out for more videos in the series. I might be a little bit stingy and start charging money for the next ones, depending on how people have reacted to this video. In which case I'll do it on Patreon or something like that, and there'll be different packages and different levels where you'll get more. But also keep an eye on like my Instagram account and, you know, Facebook writing page, because I might start, you know, cutting out some of these wee clips from these videos and dragging it to the, you know, the mothership of the video, you know, where it came from. If I've said anything particularly clever or made a face that I kind of thought was pretty funny and might entertain a few people, I'll stick that on Instagram and see if it drives a bit of traffic towards this video. I'll also say that if you are hoping to get responses out of me about the subject matter of these things, Don't be afraid to ask me more than once, because sometimes my life gets really busy and I forget to follow up on things. So yeah, with that all said, thank you very much for making it this far into the video. I hope to see you in future videos, and enjoy the writing. Get to it. It's a very fulfilling activity, and whether or not you have done it before and you're trying to sort of re-motivate yourself, or if you're just a newbie who's trying to get that confidence to get going, all I can say is sit down at the desk and do the work. You know, whatever comes out, and hopefully it'll be gold. Best luck to you all.